Hi everyone, thanks for coming tonight. I'm Alicia, I organise with Anti-Speciestist Collective. My pronouns are she, her as well. This is a really special talk for us tonight, as Lisa was the one who actually encouraged our first meeting as Anti-Speciestist Collective. We started out as a reading group for women and non-binary people to discuss sexism and speciesism. After Lisa had planted the idea in one of our organisers, 2 years later, we are so happy to welcome you here. And Lisa, we're really excited to hear from you personally too. Dr. Lisa Kemmerer is a professor of philosophy and religions at Montana State University, Billings in the US. Lisa is the author and editor of 9 books. The newest one is called Eating Earth: Environmental Ethics and Dietary Choices. Lisa also does valuable grassroots and hands-on work for the animals, the environment, and many social justice causes. Today's talk specifically will address ecofeminism theory that connects animal advocacy with other social justice movements, highlighting the importance of a more expansive social vision of liberation. It will stress that our animal activism must be connected to work in other social justice movements, and that we can only fight speciesism effectively if we do it in tandem with fighting other oppressions such as sexism and racism. Let's give a warm welcome to Lisa.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd say that was really good. Impromptu, it was perfect. So Casey has kindly offered to look after the books afterwards. So if you need to go and we're doing Q&A, hopefully Casey will just slip up here and help you out in all of, if you just look inside the first page, I've moved it to pounds and EUs. Even us from the United States can be somewhat international given half a chance, though it's a struggle. All right, so first I have to say thank you. It's wonderful to be here. I think it was Sophie that got the ball rolling, if I'm remembering right.
Yeah, it was Aga and Kez, and I just...
Kez started it in Hastings. Yeah. Kez started Hastings, and no, it's fine. So thank you so much for making it happen in Cambridge. And Angie, who just, I don't know, by the spur of the moment, the disaster in the housing situation, stepped up and said I could stay with her. Just sweet. I have loved meeting this Anti-Speciestist Collective and the people here who are activists in various capacities. So you have a wonderful place here, and the history for me, coming from a place with lots of land and not a lot of culture, it's really nice. It's really been wonderful. All right, so let's see if I can make the technology work. Oh, it's always exciting for me. So my task today is to leave here, hopefully, having given you a very good sense of a theory that helps us connect different forms of oppression. That's my task. Right, so in my personal history, this is a list of my books, and this will give you all great hope. I didn't really understand these connections. I started out, I guess, an environmentalist and didn't really know I was a feminist, but I definitely was from a very young age. And I started to make these connections not that long ago when I started working. When I got through university and I went through to Glasgow, I had a bunch of white male instructors, and I really never learned anything except white male philosophy and my degrees in philosophy. And so most of this was left for me after I graduated. And as I started to work and write, you can see I went from ethics and animals, which was right in my degree. That's what I studied, and that's what I got a degree. And then I started an anthology of women, my sister's suggestion. And next thing I knew, I had added just a different, like there was some stuff on race in there. And if you look at it, it touches on other ideas, ableism as well, some ageism, but those aren't as well covered. And if I do the book again, I'd have more of those. But I got right into feminism and immediately also into a bit of the other connections. Religions ties back to ethics when I started working in religions. As I moved on, my sister again suggested, why don't you do one on primates and one on bears? And I started working on those books. And what those are, in disguise, is animal liberation drawing people in that have only liked primates or only like bears. You know, they, oh, bears, and they pick up the book, and it's a flaming manifesto for veganism and, you know, kind of all the other things. So it's a way of connecting with others without making it obvious on the cover. So those, and environment too. Environmentalists will pick up this book and find out, you got to go vegan. If you care about a bear, you got to change what you eat. So these things become obvious in these books, but for me it was also ways of making these connections as I worked through and learned. And the last books that these last 3 that I've done are all just absolutely eco-feminist, even though you would never know. No, you'd never know looking at the title, unless you know it's, you know, a female author doing environment and animals, and then you can, or if you know who I am, you're quickly going to figure out that it's all going to be in there. So you could see my development just in my publications. And this one, again, you'd never know it. The last chapter is on hunting, and it's one of my favorite feminist writings that I've done. It just really attacks the machismo and the idea of killing, and with a wry humor that is starting to come into my own, right? It takes a while. So this is my trajectory and how I made these connections. And so all of you, by my account, you're ahead of me. You're a long ways ahead of me. And where you'll go in your lives is probably going to be even farther, which is exciting for me. And it's what, and also too, in meeting you and being around you, I sure, I mean, you keep me on my toes. The things, the progressiveness of college students these days. So I live in Montana, it's not that progressive. But when I come to places like this, I remember I have to, you know, I have to just try really hard to do things that just don't matter in Montana. I try to, in fact, if I did them in Montana, it would hurt my ability to communicate with people. So I'm from a really different world in many ways, and it's really good for me to have ties like you all to keep me growing and keep me on my toes. Here's some other ecofeminists. I always like to say thank you to those who have come before me, who have done a lot of hard work, who have helped develop these theories, and I think all of them, oh, except Marty Keel. All of them are still working. And we'll do some stuff that Marty Keel started. Carol Adams, wonderful human, always supportive and helpful of my work. So one of the things I noticed is that there's as I started to get the connection, I went to a conference in Stony Brook in New York. It was a feminist conference, and somebody invited me there to come and talk about animal stuff because there was an animal liberation conference in the town at the same time. So I went over and gave my talk about how we're exploiting animals, and that if you're really a feminist, you have to change your diet, and how can we complain about all the things that are happening to us while we're hurting these other animals? Oh, they just hated me. They were ready to just tie me up and throw me in the well when I was done. And it was really a learning experience. So I learned a few things. One of the things is there is definitely a huge gap between the feminists and the animal liberationists, even though there shouldn't be. And the second thing I learned is that I'm an idiot, and I'm clueless, and I'm insensitive, and I don't always deal with these things well. I'm working so much on this. Tact has been my nemesis since I was born. So trying very hard to be tactful in how you present these things. So I learned that when women get together, they don't want someone to show up and tell them that they're not oppressed, somebody else is. Duh. But I didn't grasp that walking into it, right? So how we handle these things matters. We have to be sensitive. When we see a group of people together talking about their hardships, you don't want to walk in and say, oh, you haven't got it that bad. Look over here at what you're doing, right? So thinking about these things and how we approach others. But education is the key. How we do it is important, but we should never stop educating. Ecofeminism is one of the keys to this across oppressions education. So ecofeminism is a theory. Okay, so a theory is like the theory of gravity. It's not something you can go and put your finger on and say, look, here it is, I can show it to you. Here's the theory. It's a theory that when you look at the world and how it works, it makes sense, just like theories of gravity do. And I'll show you why as we move through the PowerPoint. So it's varied. There's different strains of ecofeminism. Some of them even reject bringing animals into the theory and protecting them. So just know that there's different strains, and I'm going to cover kind of a clear line that runs through and pulls animals in, because to me it's the only thing that makes sense. And that it's new and developing. So this is a new theory, and some of the strains that don't include animals, I'm guessing it's just because they haven't had a chance to work it through and see that that doesn't make sense. All right, so this theory, in a nutshell, connects the denigration of women and nature. So that's where it started. That's the core of ecofeminism around 1970. Now here's the evidence that I'm going to give for this theory. We're going to look at our worldview, and this is actually a whole lot easier than if I was, say, speaking in India, because our worldview, we basically, the United States folks come from over here, and our worldview is very similar. I'll show how language also reveals shows ecofeminism to be true, and I'll show that if we look at parallel oppressions and exploitation, that's also evidence, just like you have evidence for things like gravity, if you're going to try to show what's happening. So this is the evidence that we do present to show that ecofeminism makes sense. One of the key ideas is false value dualisms. Now, you all are very clued in on binaries, right? This is just something that, when I went to college, nobody ever heard. We weren't complaining about these things. Now you are. This is a really good thing. So what are false value dualisms? And I think each word is important, so I've given them all different colors so that none of them will be ignored. So they are wrong. They are valuations, and they are dualistic. And all of this is important to understanding them. So if you look at the A and the not A side, you have the ideas, for instance, that there is a manness and a not manness, that there is humans and then there's animals. And of course, the reason they're false is because in truth, there are not just men and then everything else, and there are not just humans and then animals, right? Humans are animals, we're primates, we're mammals. And if you look at things like sex, trying to divide it into male and female, your generation is much more clued in that that's nonsense. But previously it was really believed that there were men and there were women and there was nothing else. And in fact, I suppose most of the world still runs that way. And they used to do things like when a baby was born, if they couldn't tell, they would just do an operation and decide what the baby was. And that's even still happening. There was a case in, I think it was North Carolina or South Carolina, where they did just that. The baby was born. And of course, if you can't really tell what it is, what must it be? Guess, what is it?
Male.
Ooh, I like your thinking, but if male is the ideal, can we have any blemishes in the maleness? Right, can we? No, it has to be very clearly male. You have to have a penis and testicles, and that nothing else will do. Right? We were looking at art yesterday, and the obvious showing of maleness, you know. So I see where you're thinking. The truth is that if they can't tell what you are, you have to be a female. So they rearranged this baby, and baby grew up, got into a child, said, when am I going to grow a penis, right? The kid knew that he was a boy. And so now there was a lawsuit pending last I checked it. So the idea, and if they can win it, they can change the system so that they won't just automatically decide you're going to be a boy or a girl, because we have this idea that you are either a boy or a girl. So these kind of binaries are dangerous, hurtful, and just plain wrong-headed. It is not real. There are so many genotypes. And if you read there's actually some great books now out on the different genotypes that are out there that are part of our beautiful diversity. All right, so valuation. So you have this idea that it is split in two, and then you have an idea that one is good and the other is not so good. So that's where the valuation is. It's false because it simply isn't true. These are not dualistic opposites, and the valuation is that even though it doesn't really exist, we're going to say that there's a division, and we're going to say that one is better than the other. And through that, you get a hierarchy with all of these things on top and all of these things denigrated. All right, and then once they're denigrated, you have dominance over. So these are the elite choice, these are the not so good choices. And then in the end, they end up associated with one another. All right, so the things on the not A side end up being viewed as somehow connected. Not clear to me why that is, but all things that aren't as good are seen as interconnected. So, for instance, animal and female is clearly visible there. Here we have color and animal. So if you're a person of color, you're more likely to be viewed as uncivilized, as matter rather than spirit. So all the things on the not A side are more apt to be dumped on you. So here's some examples of that. here we have the female as, you know, the females are viewed as emotional, as irrational. As a philosopher, it's so annoying, especially when I look out at, humans are irrational to me, because reason is kind of how I function. I was just kind of born that way. It's so annoying to have males somehow imagine that just because I'm a female, they're going to be able to just talk me in circles, and they don't have a hope of it, especially on this topic. But it's humorous, their assumptions. So the emotional, that they're going to be less cultured, irrational, and animalian. So here you have the image of the, you know, what is not the very bright, you see you have the dumb blonde, you got, you know, the cow, you got all this imagery, this denigrating, and the mixing of female and animal and nature and uncivilized. And of course here you have the same, something that really echoes, they're the same sort of thing, but the animal as portrayed as female. These are the dominated, exploited other. These are the not A's, and how you can see how they're interconnected. Here's another example, working with people of color. We have indigenous and female, and in this case, it leads to all these other denigrations in the eyes of the A and not A vision. So you have the very animalian, the vision of, she's got on the leopard skin, she's running in the wild, it's like she's part of a cheetah pack instead of being the human being that she is. So those are examples of animal and race. And here's another one. Notice how these ads are so offensive. They're so offensive, and yet so many people look at these and don't see it. They don't see what's going on here. And this is an interesting one too, and if we had more time I'd talk more about the male side of things. But whenever you see men portrayed as animals, it's in a positive light, in a dominant light. And we'll look at that in at least one other place. Production and reproduction. So here's another thing that I have also come to later but found absolutely fascinating to explore as a scholar. The connections between production and reproduction and all of the isms. So if you are, for example, not abled. All right, now if you're not abled, you're kind of like a cow. They've got to feed you and look after you, but you know, they can't get a lot out of you. They can maybe try to exploit you, but unlike the cow, they can't overtly exploit you. So if you're a capitalist and you're rooted in production and reproduction, well, maybe they can get you to reproduce a baby, so you'll have boots on the ground in the army or warm butts in the pews in the church, which is kind of how wombs have been envisioned down through time by males. So if you are older, obviously, women are devalued as they age. It's because we're about production and reproduction. If you go around the circle, you could just see, and this is another really interesting one, current for our time. The reason that anyone who is not cisgender or hetero has been devalued is they can't be part of that production and reproduction. We want babies. The church wants babies. The state wants babies. So if you're not part of that, you're devalued. So you can see again these connections across oppressions. And nature. Again, the idea, we recognize that animal agriculture, the denigration of animals and the exploitation of animals for food is the #1 cause of deforestation, freshwater reduction, destruction of the seas. That was cool. Wow. Yeah, technology at its best. So again, you can see that environmental concerns are linked with animal exploitation. And of course, because animal exploitation is linked with feminism and classism, they're all connected. This is one that I've really taken up to write about. It's really probably where, as a kid, I started, but in my later books, it's kind of become the focus after being dropped for many years to focus on animal issues. Turning to language and looking at the use of language, here are some examples of how we can see the theory of ecofeminism manifest in how we talk. So if you take a word like Mother Nature, why should nature be envisioned any more as mother or father? And again, why the binary? Is nature parental? No more than devouring of things. So this is us kind of anthropomorphizing in a way that helps to keep women and nature down, to be associated with each other and apart from maleness. Fertile lands, what do you do with fertile lands? Impregnate them, exploit them, make the babies come. Virgin forests, what do you do with the virgin forest? Rape it. If you've come to a place where a forest has been clear-cut, you see the rape of the forest. So you see that imagery, the language of male dominance over something feminine. Plowing the fields and deflowering, both euphemisms for males having sex with females. Harvesting, I love this one. When people talk about going out to harvest a bear, I just say, oh, so it's like you're picking corn, are you? You've planted it, tended it, and the corn's just sitting there and you're going to pluck it, and it's such a way of hiding what's really going on here. You don't harvest other animals, you kill them. And they're not yours to take, it's not your crop. And I actually had somebody at some point tell me I was withering on the vine. So this is one that has been directed at me. Apparently I was supposed to get married. Who knew? Now one of my favorites is husbandry, but before we go to that, look at this off the net. Don't frack your mother. And this makes me stop to think about all the cursing that has become popular. And of course the main word is the F word. What's with that? How many of you use the F word regularly? Come on, fess up. Yep. All right, so is that violent? Is it violent towards women? I think it's pretty clear that this is part of misogyny. This is us taking something that should be safe and beautiful and warm between individuals, whatever sexes they are, and turning it into something violent and dominating and angry and dangerous. 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 And then the mother figure there, Earth, Mother, and that the insult of insulting someone's mother, which has always been the great insult. What's the one, like calling someone a bastard, which is an indication of the mother. There's another one which isn't coming to me. Anybody, can you think of the word I'm thinking of? It's like bastard. But it insults the mother. So again, think about how you talk. Think about what you're saying. Just because everyone else is doing it, it's like diet. It doesn't mean you want to do it. Think it through first. Husbandry. All right, so here's a really classic word that none of us ever wants to use because it's embarrassing in its transparency. So farmers and ranchers dominate, control, manipulate, and exploit the land and animals. So is this an indication of what? Husbands? Husbandry, so tending, taking care of, exploiting. So husbandry here is being used as taking what a man, presumably the relationship of a man to a woman in a traditional old-style household, and saying, and now we're going to do that same thing with, say, wildlife or with cows out in the pasture. Okay, I don't know about you, but I find this pretty frightening and insulting and frightening. So again, it's a term we want to think through and not use. Female and nature are being associated with one another and denigrated. Other examples of language. So why do I have some red ones here? What are the red ones? Someone spit it out.
They look like the ones we eat.
They're the farmed animals, exactly so. So those are the farmed animals. So notice how many are farmed animals. Again, back to the husbandry, back to what we're keeping at home for our purposes. The women are just like the cows. We're keeping them around and nurturing them for our uses. Notice that the only one here that's kind of similar this isn't eaten. Right? And it doesn't have a negative derogatory sound, right? To be a stud is cool, right? So you can see here the male. And here even dog, while it's negative, it's not negative like bitch. There's a certain power in being a dog, but not in being a bitch. And you can feel it. All right, and so the blue ones, notice the cat imagery here. Why cats? Why cats? And of course there's the dog and the cat, so it's that dualism. The women are versions of cats. If you're an older person that likes women like so many men do, if you're an older, sorry I said it wrong, if you're an older woman that likes younger men, like so many men with women, you're a cougar, right? And the kitten is a plaything, and pussy is a sex object. So one interesting thing here, if you type in bitch, and I did it, you will not get what the word actually means. You will get something more like this. Because that's the normal usage. We don't talk about dogs when we say bitch. It's a male-dominated world. When you say bitch, you mean something a lot more like this. And here we have the feminized animal, or you can say it either way. It's clearly a female, and it's clearly a pig. And I tried to imagine that if that pig were turned into a boy. Why is that different? What's the importance of having the pig be female? Right? This is an exploitable individual. This is not a powerful individual. This is one that we can kill and eat. Hunting language, and this is the last chapter of Eating Earth, some of the stuff from that. So I want to just look quickly at 3 things here that happen when you deal with hunting language. And it's just fascinating stuff to really look at. And I credit Marty Keel with getting the ball rolling on this. So first you demean and objectify them. They're just animals, they're dumb. And notice here the link with ableism, that dumb really means just that you can't hear. So why has that become derogatory and been an indication of being stupid? You've got beasts, again, uncivilized, associated with nature, and you've got this idea of harvesting, like you're going out to pluck the grapes. All right, so then you have sex as dominance. So the images here, the happy men who have conquered what they would like to have you believe are fierce, wild animals that need to be, that can be, but it's very difficult, takes lots of skill, a lot of bravery. Anyone who knows anything about animals that live out on their own, free-ranging animals, they're afraid of us, every last one of them. And I live in a place where there's grizzlies, and I've never had a grizzly do anything but run away from me. We have rattlesnakes. I have seen sometimes a dozen in a summer out walking my dogs. They just want to be left alone. I have never seen a creature in the wild who comes looking for me to try to find me because they want to eat me. If I'm an idiot and do something stupid like running around grizzly country without making noise or in a place where they're likely to be feeding, then I might get eaten and it would serve me right. But guess who would be dead if I got chewed on? The grizzly, right? We don't tolerate them doing what's natural to them, but we do think we're a real big deal in the male world to dominate these big animals. You have to make them very masculine and tough so you can feel like you've really done something. What's great about this is the language, how the language is linked to sex. So, intimacy with nature. What's one of the main excuses men give to still hunt when it's clearly unnecessary is, I've got to get out in the world, I've got to bond with my son. And I always say, yeah, do it, go plant a garden, you can go out there and dig around every day with them. And you know what? You'll come home with something every day. Unlike hunting, where you'll waste a lot of gas and bullets, and you may or may not find anything that you've destroyed, or that you can destroy. So this idea of intimacy, that somehow killing animals is an intimacy with nature and a way of bonding man to man. Then you have the phallic gun. All right, so clearly this is a very phallic looking item, and their bullets are actually called balls. They refer to them as balls. I don't know if any of you have been around hunters, but the bullets are balls. The firing is called discharge, and if you do it too soon, it's premature. When you actually hit something, it's called penetration. And I actually asked students in my classrooms why they hunt. And one student was once honest and said, it's orgasmic. I thought, wow, who thought you'd ever be honest like that? I thought that was pretty good. I just smiled. I thought, okay, you've said everything that needs saying here. So you can see here what's going on with hunting, that it's how it's developed. Again, it ties back to ecofeminism, the theories, the binaries, the male bolstering dominance and separation from everything of nature, female, the not A's. Now, hunting is also viewed as a combat. Again, if you're going to go out and kill something, you don't want to kill daisies. You want to really feel like you've done something. So you have to build up these animals as fierce, and you make it like a combat. So you're going out in a dangerous wilderness, and you've got to have lots of expensive gadgets. And they often dress, and you can see here, the one on the bottom certainly has on his warlike garb. as well as the female that we see there. And there's always this conquering, and these are definitely, all of them are conquering positions. So that's the dominance. Now, in the United States, there's no longer that much money in hunting compared with viewing wildlife in other ways. So what they're doing is recruiting little girls and women. So here you have the image of the female huntress. How is her pose different than theirs?
Sexual.
Very sexualized. What else?
She's not looking at the camera.
Yes. So she is there for someone looking at her. They're just themselves. They're looking straight ahead. They've got their dead animal and they're just proud of themselves and they're in their own bodies being individuals. But we see the girl with a look that is posing for someone else to see her in a position that is not one of power, but one of like false power. She's in that, here I am trying to look tough, but I'm a girl. Right, so here we see wildness and animal and feminine, and you see some kind of weird twists going on here, because if you want hunting to be dangerous and you're training little girls to do it, we're starting to bump into some problems that the hunters don't seem to have noticed yet, but I'm onto it. And I can't wait to ask my the first time I get a chance to actually dialogue with a hunter about this. It'll probably be in the classroom, but we'll see. We'll see who I can snag. So fair chase is another example of the deceptive language going on. So fair chase is about the idea of equality and that there's a pursuit. So and this is a kind of an age-old tradition. Is it true here too? Or is this just a United States idea, this fair chase?
Oh yeah.
So you have it as well.
Yeah, well they have it in fox hunting, you know, when the foxes go off, and if it's the sports, you know.
That's right. For it to be a sport, right, you want fairness. That's what sport's all about. So this notion of fair chase, but how can it possibly be fair for a man with a gun going out hunting and then there's a duck just sitting on the water who has no idea the hunt's going on? The duck weighs, what, a pound? No weapon. This is fair? It's a sport? How come the duck doesn't know about it? Doesn't the duck get to say, I don't want to play today? How can it be a sport where one person gets to say, I win, and the other one's dead? This is not sport. And there is no fair chase. There's nothing fair about this, and there's no chase. Usually once the animal runs, the hunt's over. You've been detected, you're done. You probably can't kill them, and if you shoot at them, you will probably wound them. So there's no fair chase. So I've picked a few other words here that seem to fit a lot better. Ambush, for example, massacre, assassination, all of these definitions fit better what's actually going on. But nobody in the hunting tradition would want to say, we're going out for a massacre today. Let's perform an assassination. Come on, son, it's time for an ambush. We're going to find those innocent little fawns and see if we can kill them. Any little girl could do it, but I'm taking you out to do it today. I mean, this is not a dialogue that's going to happen because of its association with manliness. And this is why I have included this word in the title. There is so much nonsense. So we've bumped into the idea of bitch, and we've the use of language, and that so much of this is just built on falseness. Another example of language, objectification and instrumental value. You can see here the similarity in the images. So women and animals are here for others, not for themselves. And you saw this in the female hunter. She was looking out to someone looking back to her. She wasn't an independent agent. They're about labor and reproduction, not about their own lives. And language shows this, right? You have, in my case, my mother was called Mrs. Walter Kemmerer, right? So there was Dad's full name and then a Mrs. stuck in front of it. So she disappeared as the wife of my dad. And they become livestock. So they're in a box, it's like a box on a shelf that somebody puts up there. There's the livestock, it's here for us later. It's all ready for us to consume. That's all it is. And just as these images show. So So these images also, I think, really bring home the parallel oppression and exploitation that ecofeminism talks about. The not male and the not human here, objectified, sexualized, instrumental value. These images really, is this a female? Is this a chicken? Is this a woman that has a chicken's head and chicken feet? I mean, what is this artist thinking? Was this artist thinking? And the use here of the leg, consumption. You are here to be consumed if you are a female. More images, and if you watch, you will see so many of these types of images. To me, this is one of the most offensive, right? The turkey hooker. So here you have the turkey hooker, right? So a hooker is a prostitute, right? So here we have the turkey hooker, and the hook is shoved up the entry that's cleared out, which would be it's actually called the quackula in a bird, shoved up from pan to platter. There you go, a dead bird. And notice the feminized. I'm sure turkeys are as many males as females, but if you're going to consume them, you don't want to consume anything male. It's females that are here for our consumption. And look at her, she wants to be consumed. She's just excited about the idea of someone gobbling her up. So as women, and this is one thing that as an ecofeminist, that I couldn't help but bump into these things as a philosopher, as a thinking individual. I know and I have experienced being flesh for someone else. I have had the experience, as almost every woman has, of being eyed and touched by someone in ways I did not want, because I was viewed as an object for someone else's satisfaction. And if you are a man, I'm delighted that you're here. Try to understand it, but you can't feel it. You can't know it. If you're, it's just something visceral. It's something you grow up with. It's something you fight with. It's something when you're young, you don't know. You kind of go along with it because you don't know any different. And at some point, you're affronted by it. At points, you're hurt by it. It becomes the narrative of your life that shapes you. And in my case, it puts me in a different relationship to other animals. One in which I understand what it's like to have someone have designs on your body. Evil designs that are against your well-being, that are against what you would want for yourself. But you're not asked. So the binaries, the dualisms that put women in a jeopardized, unsafe position in a world of dominance by those who consume, who are on the A side. Here a graphic image of the consumability, the objectification, the body, not a living being, not a woman with volition and mind, but a body here for someone else to use for their purposes. Just like a chicken. And I think that you can see in our culture, it's getting now so that the mainstream knows about these images, but there's a real indifference to it. There's a real lack of they're dumb animals, and on top of that, they're not saying, but they're females. They're matter, not spirit. They're farther from God, not closer. Whatever way they look at it, there's this divide, there's this division that allows us to be indifferent to the suffering of women and people of color and animals. Sorry, I haven't told you, I use the Y. Animals it's a way of talking about all other species as a speaker and not having to say other animals or non-human animals. It's just a shorter way it's a word that works so that we don't pretend that we're not animals. We are. And I hope I will never use the word without acknowledging that we are animals. So I do it with the Y. So we have a great indifference to those in the not A side, and those are the ones that are the isms, and that is why they are all connected, and that is how ecofeminism shows them to be connected. I actually got busy and did a little math, and here's a really clear way of looking at the problems that are unique to females just in the food industry. So notice that in the red here, you can see that the females are suffering much longer. And I will add that they are suffering differently. It is the cows whose babies are taken from them. It is the cows who are forcibly milked, who are forced to take hormones so that they will produce more milk. They are the ones who have pus on their udders, and they suffer longer because they are repeatedly impregnated. Their babies are repeatedly stolen from them. And in the sows, again, repeatedly impregnated, repeatedly put in these farrowing and gestation crates, and their young repeatedly taken from them. Hens, some of the most abused, put in the tiniest of pens to produce eggs, an outrageous number of eggs. I think in the wild they lay maybe 9 eggs a year, and they're a native fowl of India. So their reproduction is being exploited. I know how I would feel about that if I were exploited for my reproductive capacity because I'm a female, so that someone in power could use my reproduction for their production, for their power, for their wealth. It's not right. And the question is how to help feminists to see this message tactfully. And you can see how powerful it is, right? I have trouble believing that a feminist who is approached properly would not be able to say, at least I see what you're saying. And this is our task, is to learn how to know this information and to learn how to do this. In the case of feminism, in the case of classism, in the case of racism, to show how these oppressions are connected. And to do otherwise is not the right thing. So as a woman, I know that I'm oppressed. And because I'm a woman, I can say, I know I'm not nearly as oppressed as any of the farmed animals, and generally as animals in general. But the comparison isn't important. What matters is that you're never going to free women without freeing animals, and you're never going to free animals without freeing women. So if you want liberation, it has to be total liberation. I thank you all for coming. I thank you for being interested in oppressions, and I wish you all good luck in the course of your lives in bringing change. So thank you. Thank you.